All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And as I said, it's behind enemy lines time, and I got my guy James joining me from Mr. Bucks Nation. What's up, James? How you doing?
Jesse, I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for having me on. Greatly appreciated, and happy to be here today. Grateful to be here today, and excited to dive into this matchup here between two good NFC teams. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at the schedule remaining for the Bucks, and outside of this game, the Bucks go on a bye week. At that point, they should be getting Mike Evans back. I would hope. Hamstrings can be tricky, but I would think they would get him after the bye week, and then down the stretch, it looks like a lot of very winnable games for the Bucks. So even if they drop this one, chances of making the playoffs are still at least existent with that schedule down the stretch.
Yeah, that's kind of been what a lot of people have been pointing to, um, being the first half of the Bucks schedule pretty difficult, right? The Bucks are coming off of games against two games against the Atlanta Falcons, a game against the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday Night Football, game against the Baltimore Ravens, and now this game against the San Francisco 49ers. But in the second half, like you said, definitely a lot easier games, so to speak, in that second half of the schedule. So, obviously we'll get to that point when we get to it, but it is going to be, I think, a lot of fun, this matchup this upcoming week as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. Now, obviously, coming off of a very, very tough game where, I mean, gosh, they gave the Chiefs everything they could handle at Arrowhead, go to overtime. Weather wasn't the best, and they battled, and through all the injuries and everything. What do you think the pulse of the fan base is? I mean, you're around it on a regular basis. You know what these guys are feeling like. I mean, with the expectations going into the season, I gotta imagine last year losing to the Lions in the playoffs, feeling pretty good about the team that's returning this year. Some young players that are in year two now, Yaya Diaby, guys like that can make an impact. And then to start out 4-4, and then potentially 4-5 going into the bye week. How's the fan base feeling about this year so far?
Yeah, when we had discussed some of the stuff that we'd be talking about, I thought about that of, like expectations before the season. And it's interesting. I think expectations change throughout a season, right? And there's two mindsets where on one hand, you talked about it, where against the Chiefs, and really against a couple of teams this year, the Bucks have been competitive. And while in one mindset, you can look at that and say, well, hey, they're competitive. They're still fighting for their coach. They're still fighting as a team. They're still playing competitive football. That is a good thing. There's another side of that mindset, which is they haven't been able to close out those games. They haven't been able to win those games, right? And that has led to a lot of frustration in the fan base, be it with the general manager, be it with the head coach. There's a lot of frustration there for this team not being able to close out those games. So it really is a dual mindset, right? Where you have one side of the fan base that is very proud, very happy that the team is competing in these games. And then the other side of it is, well, yes, they are competing, but they aren't closing out these games. They aren't winning these games. Well, why isn't the team winning these games? Well, it must be the head coach and it must be the general manager. And that's kind of where you get that dual mindset type of situation. In some ways, I was kind of thinking about it in some ways. And I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions about this.
Yeah.
The 49ers are kind of in a similar type of situation. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at the fan base, first of all, expectation was Super Bowl. This is a team that lost Super Bowl last year. And if you're going to quote unquote run things back, the expectation is that you get there again. And to start 4-4, I mean, if they had lost to Dallas, this fan base would have gone bonkers. Like losing to Dallas would have been rock bottom. I honestly felt like the 49ers were hanging on maybe a year too long, just looking at the age of some of the players and the salary cap. But I understand going forward again. And I think half the fan base right now is like, man, fire Kyle. I'm over it. He's never going to win. And the other half's like, chill. We've been here before. We've started 3-5. We've started 2-4. And we've made it to NFC championships in both those years. Things are going to be fine. So the fan base is a little bit of everywhere right now.
Yeah, no, and I'm looking at the previous games for the 49ers. It's like, a one score loss against Minnesota, a one score loss against the Rams, a one score loss against the Cardinals, like and even again, like just a couple weeks ago, a loss to the Chiefs. Like it's very similar types of scenarios that the Bucs have been in, right? Where you drop 2 games to the Atlanta Falcons that were winnable games. You drop a game against the Kansas City Chiefs that was a winnable game. Like both these organizations are similar vibes. Now, I will say I don't necessarily believe pre-season expectations for the Bucs was Super Bowl per se, but this was a team that was coming off of a wild card win last year, made it to the divisional round, really gave the Lions a shot, and was almost in the NFC Championship game. So there were expectations there, right, for this team to perform well, even tough first half of the schedule aside. So, no, I agree, man. Like it is, um, it's always ebbs and flows, right, with expectations and fan reactions and whatnot. And right now, for the Bucs, whenever you lose, you know, 4 out of your last 5 football games, the fans are not going to be very happy, especially when 3 out of those 4 games, 3 out of those 4 losses were pretty winnable games.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I happened to be at the Ravens game. My son's a Ravens fan, so we went to the Ravens Bucks Monday Night Football. And when you look at that game, it's not the loss to the Ravens; it was the loss of Evans and Godwin that really, really hurt the most. Godwin done for the year; he was having the best year of his career, arguably to start at least. Mike Evans is, in my opinion, either approaching or right already there as a top 10 receiver of all time. I mean, you go look at what Mike Evans has produced, it's absolutely incredible. And to lose both of them on the same night was brutal, knowing that the schedule was going to get tough. But speaking of tough, Baker Mayfield, man, I got to be honest with you, during that draft process when he came out with Allen and Lamar, I didn't think Baker was going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. I thought Josh Allen was going to be that guy, but for me, Baker was not somebody. I said he might be out of the league in 5 years. Like that was kind of my bold prediction, and it almost looked like it was trending that way. But man, credit to Baker Mayfield for turning it around, maturing a lot. I think is a big part of this. Really taking to the Tampa culture, taking less money than maybe what he could have after the year that he had to stay in a spot where the culture's good, everything fits him really well, and he can resume his career. But I am so impressed with Baker Mayfield, the way he's played without Godwin, without Evans, the way he played last year while he's injured. Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback, man. What is the fan base's thought on Baker Mayfield? Do they feel like they have a guy that they can move forward with as a franchise guy? Are people still like, maybe I want to see more? Like, what is everybody thinking about Baker Mayfield?
I think with any quarterback, firstly, I think you are still going to get people who will always say like, "Oh, I still want to see more."
Mhm.
Be it with anybody. I mean, gosh, even the greats, where it's like, up, Tom Brady didn't do enough to help so and so, the Bucks win, or Brock Purdy's not, whatever the situation might be. There's
Mhm.
always going to be people who doubt the quarterback. That's just there for some people it's never going to be enough, right? But first, I mean, hey, first off, you were right about Josh Allen. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, I did get that right. I did get
yeah.
that. I was very wrong about Baker, though, it turns out. So,
Yeah, but I think for the most part, people have been very embracing of Baker Mayfield. Myself personally, it's hard to not love this guy. I'm a huge fan of Baker Mayfield since he's come to the Bucs. Even right now, Jesse, I mean, he leads the league in touchdown passes so far this year. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. Thankfully he didn't have any in last week's game against the Chiefs, but he did have 7 in the past 3 games before that. He did have 10 passing touchdowns as well. But really, stats are one thing. I think one thing that you said is just the type of leadership that he brings, the type of attitude that he brings. I mean, I always talk about it where it's like, this guy's just a dog. He just gets after it, like just his type of just scrappy mentality, just fighting mentality, is infectious, really, is the best way to put it. This is a guy who's gonna fight all the way to the end of a football game, and is always, always, always going to compete for his team to win. And that's the type of guys that you want in your locker room, right? I personally think that this is a guy that you can have at quarterback for the next few years. He's only 29 years old right now. He'll be turning 30 in April of next year. So yeah, I think this is a guy that you can have for the next few years. Feel really good about where he's at. He's had a good amount of success in Tampa, and it's been a great story, right? To just follow the career resurgence of Baker Mayfield. He made the Pro Bowl last year. He was 3rd for comeback player of the year after just a not great 2022 season where he was with the Panthers, and then you saw flashes of what he could be, with the Rams. And since he came in with the Bucs, he's looked about the best that he's looked in his entire career. So it's been very encouraging. It's been very awesome to see. And I'm very happy with where the Bucs have had, with what the Bucs have had with Baker Mayfield. I think a lot of fans would agree with that, but you are always going to get those people who are like, well, it's never enough, and unfortunately you can never satisfy people like that.
Yeah, I think, when the Bucs first got Baker, it was after Tom Brady retired, and it's like, okay, well, you're getting a guy who might be starting level, but the reality is he's here for a year. Then you're going to be searching for your franchise guy. You're kind of in this rebuild type mode, and Mike Evans might be gone. Is he going to want to stick around for it? Like, those were all the conversations. At the very least, Baker Mayfield did enough for them to get to the playoffs last year, keep Mike Evans in a Bucs uniform, which I think was a very popular thing amongst Bucs fans. They didn't want to see him play anywhere else. And they are battling this year. I still don't think like Baker's elite by any means, but he doesn't have to be. When you pay a guy $35 million, he's in that range where, dude, he's like perfectly adequately paid for what he's delivering, and you can win with that. It's when you overpay guys that are on Baker's level, let's say Dak Prescott. Maybe Dak's a little bit better depending on where your rankings are at, but not 60 million to 35 million better. And that's where you have those issues. I think Baker is paid perfectly for the way things should be, and it's in a spot to where the Bucs can continue to build around him and compete in the future, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, to get a guy like Baker for $30 million per year, $33 million per year, I think that's very solid value, like he's better I don't think it's crazy to say he's like a top 15 quarterback in this league, and on good days, you probably bump him up to top 10, maybe top 8, something like that. If he's like really on one, but like to have that type of guy, like and what we've been seeing with the Bucs is like, he's got a higher floor than some of these guys, like a Daniel Jones, for example, with the New York Giants. That situation did not work out well. But no, I agree. Like, I think the Bucs got really good value with Baker. I think that and you alluded to it earlier, where it's like it's really been just a perfect pairing of organization and player. And it's very rare whenever you find situations like that. I'm gonna be honest, I don't necessarily know how your chat feels about this guy right now, but like it's very similar, kind of like 49ers and like Brock Purdy, for
Yeah.
example. Like
Yeah.
where it's just the guy's in the right system and he's finding success, you know. Um, Baker's in the right systems here in Tampa Bay and he's finding success, you know. It's very similar types of situations, I believe, where you know, just the quarterback's working in the system, doing what he needs to do and finding success. And it's good, you know, and there's not much, you know, like there will be times where it's like, oh man, wish this guy was playing better at quarterback. But overall, you still feel really good about the pairing of player and organization.
Yeah, I mean, the 49ers are gonna be in a situation most likely this offseason where they're really gonna have to figure out what is Brock Purdy worth, and there's definitely a big segment of this fan base that thinks Brock Purdy's an elite quarterback, and they think he should get paid open check, basically, 55 plus million. We're happy with that. Keep him here long term. He's our franchise guy. I push back on that a lot, and it's not a popular opinion, and that's okay. I think that Baker and Brock are a lot closer than people want to think that they are. I would prefer Brock Purdy. He's younger. I think he's a little bit quicker, and I think that he didn't have to go through the maturity things that Baker had to go through. But I don't think the gap is if Baker's making 33, that Brock is so much better that we can get away with paying him 55 to 65. I just don't see that gap there at all.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I didn't know that that was kind of the pulse of the 49ers fan base for
Yeah.
55, 60 million. That's a lot. I mean,
Yep.
that is a lot. I don't necessarily, just in my opinion, like 35 million, like would probably maybe 40 would feel like reasonable for like Brock Purdy, you know? Um, that's a lot. I mean, that's
That's
like
all
Patrick
there.
Mahomes-esque money, man. I really do like Brock Purdy. I think he's a very, very solid quarterback. Um, I would not say he's not worth that much. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of money. And you think about somebody like Baker for, as good as he's played, I think he could do a lot of the same things that Brock could in this system. Maybe it wouldn't be quite as good, but if it's 35 to 60 million difference, it definitely is worth it. You know what I mean? So I think I think it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting offseason. We'll see what the 49ers end up doing. We'll see how Brock continues to play. And it does look like CMC's making his way back. And I think that'll be a big help as well. But 60 million or 55 million is very, very steep. So things will change a lot in San Francisco if that's what happens for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously we'll kind of dive into it here in a little bit, but like you said, like
Yeah.
getting Christian McCaffrey back is obviously going to help out that 49ers offense. But I mean, to be honest with you, Jesse, I mean, I was sitting here thinking about it. I was like, man, but Jordan Mason's been a dog the first half of
Yeah.
this season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always just amazing to me how Kyle Shanahan, and I know that maybe some 49ers fans are, you know, kind of wearing thin on Shanahan, but like this dude's system just pumps out running backs like nobody's business. I mean,
That's so
you
true. Yeah.
you've got Jordan Mason out here like top 10 in rushing yards with 685 through 8 games. And then Isaac Gorendo out here with 227, averaging 6.1 yards per attempt. Like, it's you sit there and it's like, up, okay, yeah, these are the next 49ers running backs to come out of the woodwork and be future starters in the league somewhere else, like it's just because that's Shanahan's offense, man, just pumps out these running backs. But I do agree, obviously getting McCaffrey back is going to help just because as well as the scheme has been doing great things for Mason and Garendo here, like McCaffrey obviously is just a different beast entirely. So
Yeah, most certainly. And I think where he helps the most is the pass game. I think it's been really hard for these receivers to create separation. And a lot of that is because they just don't have to focus on the running back coming out of the backfield the way that you do with CMC. I think that's where he's really transcended the 49ers and helped, Brock Purdy flourish. So that's where I want to see him utilize the most. Like running the ball, the 49ers can do it. They figured that out without CMC, but it's the third downs. It's the route running and just knowing for Brock that I've got that safety blanket at all times, so where I can really take my time, survey the field, and then always I can come back to CMC. I think it's going to be very, very helpful. But so we've got him coming back, Jennings coming back. Obviously, Ayuk's done for the year, Hargrave's done for the year, and Greenlaw is not going to be playing this week, probably a few weeks away for him. But the 49ers are getting much healthier. I know the Bucs, who haven't had their bye, it's like always the bye week is really when you can get players back and kind of recover from the first half of the season. The Bucs are 1 week away from that. So they're dealing with some injuries. It's a long 9 games to get here. That's a lot of games played without rest. And we already talked about Mike Evans and Godwin. What does it look like for the rest of the team? How's the injury report looking?
Yeah, like you said, they are pretty banged up. Number one cornerback Jamel Dean is still on the injured reserve here. He may be a guy that can be brought back during that bye week, but like you said, they've got a lot of injuries. Not just in recent weeks with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but even further than that. Throughout this season, they've lost third inside linebacker Servassier Dennis to the injured reserve. They've lost third cornerback Bryce Hall to the injured reserve. Antoine Winfield Jr. has missed time this year. Kalijah Cansey, star defensive lineman, has missed time this year. Like, Jalen McMillan missed last week with all the injuries they've had to wide receivers. So, there's been a lot of guys that have been hurt throughout this season. They're getting a little bit healthier, about as healthy as they can get given the circumstances. But you are right. Like, obviously, injuries have played their part for the Bucs this year. Backup defensive lineman Greg Gaines has missed a couple of games as well, formerly of the rival LA Rams, and for you guys. But obviously, the big ones are always going to be Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and not having those two guys in this game is still going to continue to be an issue. Now, they have worked some ways to try and get some other playmakers the ball, such as running backs like Rashad White, Bucky Irving, even Sean Tucker, undrafted free agent running back from a couple years ago out of Syracuse. Cade Otton has been a big piece of this offense the past couple of weeks, tight end. But the injuries have still taken their toll for sure. They are definitely a banged up football team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about Bucky Irving, and maybe you were going to talk about him here, but there's other players on the Bucs that we can talk about as well. Just some players that maybe fly under the radar to other fan bases. There's always like players that are super important to a team that isn't well known to other fan bases unless they're watching them on a Monday Night Football game and they happen to hear their name. One of those guys for us is Renardo Green, who's a rookie corner, 49ers drafted this year. And he was not projected to be a starter at all. They brought in 2 veterans, and Isaac Yadam and Rock Yassin, to probably be that outside corner. And he's done nothing but come through, earn a job, really take the job away. And Kyle Shanahan is not big on playing rookies, but he's been forced to with Renardo Green. And Renardo Green, over the last 3 weeks combined, has played over 75% of the snaps. He's got a completion percentage allowed of just 43%. And although PFF is not gospel, they've got him ranked number 11 out of 205 corners right now. Very, very good young player, showing a lot of promise for the San Francisco 49ers. And I know there are players like that for the Bucs that are making a difference, especially with some of the injuries. Who might a player or two be on the Bucs that we can talk about that we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, a guy I alluded to just a moment ago is Cade Otton. Right now with all the injuries on offense, Cade Otton's really stepped up in recent weeks. I mean, the past couple of weeks, he had 100 yards against the Baltimore Ravens, 81 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Falcons, 77 yards and a touchdown against the Chiefs. Right now, he's second on the team in receiving yards. He's third on the team in receiving touchdowns. Cade has really had to step up, really essentially, Jesse, be the number one target for the Bucs here, in the absence of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So he does have a very tough matchup, as the 49ers have some very, very good linebackers. But that is one guy who has been a difference maker on offense here in recent weeks. And on defense, I think one guy that hasn't really been getting a lot of conversation has been cornerback Zion McCollum. This has been
Love
a
Zion.
really strong cornerback for the Bucs. So far this year, he's got an 86.9 Pro Football Focus grade. He's been very solid this year, in terms of coverage, in terms of tackling. He's looked fantastic, in my opinion. He does everything that you want to see, even in a number one cornerback, to where, in my opinion, Jesse, going forward, like, I think that this makes a guy like Jamel Dean very expendable, because McCollum has been playing at such a great level this year. I think it makes it more affordable to move on from a guy like Jamel Dean, after this season is done, who's had his own share of injury problems. He's also going to have a tough matchup going up against, obviously a very good wide receiver room that the 49ers have, even with Jawan Jennings coming in and making some plays if he is healthy enough to play. Debo Samuel's going to be in that mix. I believe he's healthier. Is that correct?
Yep. Yep.
So even without Brandon Ayuk, like, this isn't going to be an easy matchup for the Bucs offensively under any circumstances. I mean, again, when you have an offense of George Kittle, Debo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, and possibly even Chris McCaffrey in there as well, if he can be healthy enough to play in that game, like, you're going to need your playmakers to make plays. And McCollum's been doing that a lot this year.
Yeah, Zion McCollum came out of Sam Houston State. I believe this like his third year or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, I was shocked when he didn't get drafted higher, because he had all the measurables: 6'2", ran like a 4.3 40. I mean, it was like, there's no reason not to take a flyer on this guy. And it took a while. Like, when he first came in, it was rough for him, but he was unpolished and he needed that coaching. Over the last couple of years, he was forced to play a lot. There was a ton of injuries last year at that position group. He played really well at times last year, and now again he's doing it. Really good player. Love that. Bucky Irving is a guy that I like as well. Oregon Duck fan, so I saw a lot of Bucky at Oregon, obviously, and I know he's making a big difference. And I think that's where things get interesting with the Bucs. They're going to have to attack in a non-traditional manner without having the elite wide receivers on the outside. They're going to attack through the linebackers, and this is something that I am concerned about. Not with Fred Warner, obviously, we know he's elite, but they've really struggled to find consistent linebacker play with Dre Greenlaw still out, and Campbell is an old player. He's just not good. He's slow-footed, and he's been a liability for the 49ers. Not only that, they've got D. Winters, who's in his second year, shows flashes, but there's a lot to learn there. And so when you look at it, and you've got Rashad White, you've got Bucky, you've got Cade Otton, those linebackers are really going to be tested this week. And that, for me, is a concern. What concerns do you have matchup-wise for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week against the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, first you got to think about that 49ers offense. I mean, I mentioned it just a moment ago, but like, when you have an offense of George Kittle, Levante Davis is going to have to be on his P's and Q's. And also KJ Britt, their second inside linebacker. To your point, Jesse, he's not been good this year. He's been pretty bad. So he's going to have to try and play lights out. Going up against, while I do trust Zion McCollum, the Bucs have had injuries at cornerback. You're down to, backup cornerbacks, Josh Hayes, former 6th round pick, who's had very little experience playing outside cornerback in a starting capacity in the league. He's likely going to be your number 2 in this game. He's going up against a guy in Jawan Jennings, sometimes probably going to be going up against Debo Samuel. Ricky Purcell, I believe, is fully healthy now. Like, that's also going to be tough, right? I also worry about the pass rush. just because they've struggled to get consistent pressure. And I do believe Purdy is a guy where if you don't get pressure on him, he can very easily pick apart an opposing defense. So really a lot of the concerns offensively are there. Or for the Bucs defensively are there with the 49ers offense, just in terms of a lot of the playmakers they have. Now, Bucs offense versus 49ers defense. I mean, again, you talked about Fred Warner. You talked about some of the bigger time playmakers that they have on that defense. Like I've talked about it before with people. Like the 49ers are a very complete football team, just in terms of top to bottom. Of course, Nick Bosa is Nick Bosa. That dude's an absolute menace. But like they've also got some playmakers, and like Malik Collins has made some plays this year. Leonard Floyd has made some plays this year. I don't really know how healthy Javon Hargrave is, but I
No,
still
he's
like.
done. He's done for the year. Torn pec.
Oh, okay. Well, then
Yeah.
forget Javon Hargrave. But there are still some very good, capable defenders on this team. Fred Warner's always a menace. Like honestly, man, like as long as you have Fred Warner and Nick Bosa out there running around making plays, it's going to be concerning, right? So like that's going to be a very tough matchup for Cade Otton. That's going to be a very tough matchup for Luke Gedeke. The Buccaneers starting right tackle, who will likely be going up a lot against Nick Bosa if they move him around. Obviously, Tristan Wirfs versus Nick Bosa will just be a fun matchup to watch as well. But and even like you said, the secondary, you mentioned some of the other guys in that secondary who have been able to perform well. And quite frankly, the Bucs don't have the wide receivers to throw the ball around a lot, against this 49ers secondary. So they are going to have to rely on the running backs and the tight ends. And it just so happens that the 49ers have the best linebacker in the game right now. So
Right.
it's going to be some tough matchups there. So they are going to have to pick at whatever opportunities they have, and maybe that is some opportunities against a guy like Devondre Campbell. Maybe that is trying to find some way, shape, or form to get the running backs more involved in creative types of ways, because again, the 49ers are a very complete football team.
Yeah, they are, but they have struggled a little bit as far as stopping the run goes at times. I know that you look at it statistically, they hold up well against the run, but teams that will consistently run the ball and aren't afraid to really can make some headway against the San Francisco 49ers. But one thing that gives me confidence is the 49ers have really struggled in the red zone this year. If you look at them statistically, they're ranked 4 in the running game, they're ranked 4 in the passing game as far as yards, but they're 8th in scoring. And the big reason for that, or at least they were going into the bye week, a big reason for that is because their red zone touchdown percentage is awful. They're one of the worst red zone touchdown teams in the league. And I think a lot of that does have to do with CMC not being there. Now, assuming he does play, that obviously helps. But also playing against a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that ranks 21st defensively in the red zone should help as well. And so that's something that I think the 49ers can get on track. And the Bucs really have kind of played this game where the defense hasn't been great. They make timely plays, but they will give up their yards, they will give up their points. And so the Bucs are kind of in shootout mode a little bit. It seems like at least every other week, if not every week. The Kansas City Chiefs just put up 30 on them. That's the first time Kansas City scored 30 in forever, it feels like. So the Bucs defense can be had for sure. And I think that's a matchup that I like. Is there a matchup in particular that you're looking at that you're like, okay, this is either a matchup that I like or a matchup that they have to win in order for the Bucs to have a good chance in this game?
Again, it's something I alluded to a moment ago, where it's like being able to take advantage of guys that aren't Fred Warner or Nick Bosa on that defense. Kind of picking opportunities for the running backs to maybe get after some of the other players on that 49ers defense, or getting Cade Otton more involved, or maybe finding some way to get the wide receivers involved. Those, I think, are matchups they have to win. Otherwise, it could be a pretty long day for the Bucs. In terms of defensively, the pass rush has to get home. They have to, Jesse, to have a chance of winning this football game. That is the bigger thing for me. If the pass rush can get home, Vita Vea is coming off of a 2-sack game. Kalijah Cansey's coming off of a 2-sack game. And I know the 49ers do have a very solid offensive line in their own right. That has to be a battle that they have to win this week. And I would even say really, I think it comes down to the trenches. I was looking at it here. Anytime the 49ers have given up, let's say 100 plus yards, because in that Rams game, they gave up 98 rushing yards. They've lost all four, so I think that tells me that, like, hey, the Bucs have to win the trench battle here, and they have to rely on their running backs, tight end, Cade Otton, and they have to be able to run the ball well, but they also have to be able to pass rush against Brock Purdy as well. Will that happen? We're gonna have to wait and see. But those are kind of some of the matchups that I think they have to win.
Yeah, the Bucks are interesting where a lot of their pressure is going to come from up the middle, which is not. It's pretty. I mean, it's unique. A lot of teams they really pressure you from the outside, and then those inside guys are there to clean up. But dude, I mean, Vita Vea is. If for those of you that haven't seen Vita Vea in person, he is a full house. He's absolutely massive, and he is so freaking strong and so good. I mean, that interior offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs is as elite as it can get, and they couldn't hold him at all last week. He was a problem. So he's going to be a problem for everybody, Kansas as well. But when I look at it, I think that pressuring Brock up the middle will be an interesting change, but he's so quick-footed that those guys on the outside, Diaby and whoever you guys have, are really going to have to play discipline to keep him in the pocket and allow those guys up the middle to kind of eat a little bit. Otherwise, it could be a really, really long day.
Yeah, you got to contain the edge. Like, it's always been interesting. Like, Brock Purdy's like deceptively mobile.
He is,
Like,
yeah.
he can definitely run around if he needs to. He doesn't always, but if a play breaks down and he has to really, make a play with his legs, he has no problem doing that. So how do you fix that? Well, you've got to set the edge, right? And that falls on outside edge rushing linebackers. And quite frankly, Jesse, it's been a concern this year for the Bucs in terms of edge rushers. Like, a lot of the guys have not lived up to their moniker, so to speak. I'm talking about JTS. Yaya Diaby's been taking a step back this year. Even some of the backups, like Chris Braswell, second round pick out of Alabama, haven't necessarily lived up this year. So, I mean, those are guys that are going to have to step up in this game, force Brock Purdy inside, and force that inside pressure to get after Purdy. So I agree with you. Whether or not that's going to happen, that's a big ask. That's why I talked about that's one of those battles the Bucs have to win, right? And you've got one of the better left tackles in the game, and Trent Williams out there. I'm struggling to remember who their right tackle is right now, but I do know he is also very good as well. So it will be a very interesting battle, in my opinion.
Yeah, Colton McKivitz. And McKivitz is a guy who a lot of 49er fans, myself included, would love to upgrade. But this year, just statistically, you look at him, he's only allowed 1 sack, which is crazy as 49er fans to even think that that's a possibility. This offensive line and pass protection has played really, really well. We've watched it together on film here on the channel, and then also by every statistical measure, they've done a really good job. And Brock Purdy, again, is very elusive. His short area quickness is top notch. So he can make things shake. So I think that'll be an interesting matchup as well. And JD Durham brings up a really good point here. He says, how tired are the Bucs going to be in this game? Well, we can use that to parlay into the ultimate prediction here, James. But this is going to factor into my prediction because playing on Monday night on the road. Now, it's not like they had to travel all the way across country, but there was some travel involved. You had an overtime game. Again, we're talking about a team that is right there on the verge of a bye week, and maybe that'll give them enough to push through. But it's been a long season so far. They're trying to get healthy. They are a little bit shorthanded. This definitely plays a factor, I think, coming off of a Monday night overtime game. You think?
Yeah, I mean, it does help that this game is at home.
Mhm.
That's obviously a benefit to them. But like you said, like it was funny when I first read that comment a little bit earlier, I thought like, well, is
Mhm.
it mentally tired? Because I'm sure they're tired of losing close
Yeah,
games.
yeah.
But so that's one thing to factor in there as well. But like even physically, like you said, like obviously it's not a great situation. You're on a shorter week. That is going to be something that is going to be a factor into this, I believe, especially, uh, playing in that Florida heat, Jesse. You know that just as well as I
Yeah.
do. Like that is not easy. Now, thankfully, we are in the cooler months now here in November, but it's Florida, man. It don't really get cool here in Florida. So, we'll see how that affects both teams, honestly. The 49ers are obviously used to playing on the West Coast. It's very warm over there as well. But man, that Florida got that different kind of heat. So it'll be interesting to see how the heat affects both teams. I imagine the Bucs are probably taking a little bit easier this week going up into this 49ers game just because of playing on a shorter week, obviously playing on Monday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs. So ultimately, man, I think that will play a bit of a factor. I'm going to be honest, man. I think the mental tiredness of losing close games will probably have a bit more of an effect than the physical tiredness.
Mm.
I imagine there's probably a lot of frustration there.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And you're right. Yeah, the Florida Heat, it can be different even this time of year. You're used to playing in mild, cool weather, and then all of a sudden you've got 87 and humid. You're not necessarily expecting that. Luckily though, out in the Bay Area, it's interesting. Some of their hotter months can be September and October. So it's not like they're coming off the cool months necessarily over there, but it is different when you add humidity. Luckily, the 49ers are coming off that bye. I think that'll be helpful as well. But ultimately, I do believe the 49ers get this one done. I think they're going to win 30-21. The 49ers get back on track. I think CMC is going to play as well. I hope they don't go crazy with him. If assuming he does play, I would like no more than 15 touches. Really, if they can keep that closer to 10, I think that would be awesome as well. But I think that's going to help. That's going to give them a boost coming off a bye week. I really think we talked about it. We started the show with it, talking about the Bucs schedule. Their schedule is pretty favorable down the stretch. It's not ideal to lose this game, but they can overcome it if they get on a hot streak. And the schedule sets up for them to do that after the bye week. For the 49ers, though, their schedule coming off the bye is extremely tough. They've got teams like Green Bay, Buffalo, the Rams, the Cardinals, the Lions. So it's not going to be easy for the 49ers. If they drop this one to the Bucs, I think you can pretty much say it's over. Like this is a game they cannot lose. So for me, I think they're going to be desperate. I think they're going to be rolling coming off a bye, and I do think they get it done 30-21. How do you feel about this one? What's your score prediction?
I'll say San Francisco wins 27-20. It's been kind of a story the past few weeks where it's been, injuries have just been a lot for the Bucks to overcome, especially I mean, honestly, especially on the defensive side of the ball, more so than the offense. I think that Liam Cohen's been a fantastic offensive coordinator here for the Bucks. And he's really been creative. But quite frankly, Jesse, the Bucks just don't have the dogs, the horses on defense to get the job done. And whenever you're going against such a high-powered offense in the 49ers, I think that's going to be a bit too much to overcome, unfortunately. I do have them winning 27-20. I think it will be a closer game, right? I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout, but ultimately, I do think that, especially defensively, it'll just be a little bit too much for the Bucks to overcome here against the 49ers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this as well, 49er fans, those of you that are traveling and making this game, I'll be there as well. So definitely come up and say what's up if you see me bumping around the stadium and enjoy yourself. It's a beautiful stadium. I'll say that. I do enjoy attending Bucks games. I think they do a great job as far as just entertainment value and good seats. Everything is good there. So yeah, I think you'll enjoy yourself if you've decided to make this trip for sure. But that's going to do it for James and I. I've got James's channel linked in the description. So make sure you go check him out, show him some love. There's not, 49ers creators right now, the viewership is definitely down on this show because we've got like 5 content creators going right now for the 49ers. And so there's a lot going on. Bucks wise, there's not a ton. And it's hard to really lock someone down, but James done a great job running Mr. Bucks Nation. He's cleared 20,000. And if you can go show him some love for giving us about 45 minutes of his time, that would be greatly appreciated. So make sure you do that. James, thanks so much for joining me, man. This was really good.
Happy to be on, man. Happy to be on anytime. You run a great show here, obviously. Always appreciative of the 49ers fan base and being on here, man. You got a great community, and I'm happy that I could be a part of it for this video, man.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. Chat, I will be back probably tomorrow. Much love. Peace.